Hello, everyone. Today we'll be discussing ethnicity and educational attainment, or in other words, the extent to which your ethnic origin could affect your educational attainment. Now, before we take this ahead, I'd like to discuss the differences in terms of educational attainment based on cultural differences. Cultural differences where we initially speak about the level of interest that parents show towards the educational attainment of the child, and we'd further then speak about cultural capital. So, cultural explanations to help us understand how your educational attainment differs. To begin with, now, we also need to keep this in mind that cultural explanations could be referred to as an outschool factor. As an outschool factor, in other words, the extent to which this factor that is outside the school affects the differences in educational attainment. Now, here you go. These are the two main points that we'd be bringing in under discussion today. To begin with, when we or as we speak about parental factors, Professor Steve Strand, like I said, from the University of Oxford, here you go, Professor Steve Strand, right? Now, according to Steve Strand, who conducted his study in 2015. Now, in 2015, Steve Strand conducted a study conducted for a long period of time where we recorded developmental changes. So in 2015, Steve Strand conducted a longitudinal study and his sample comprised of 15,000 students from England, where he analyzed the differences in attainment between various ethnic groups. So, Steve Strand conducted a study in 2015. His sample comprised of 15,000 students. They were all from England. He was trying to analyze differences in educational attainment. What he found out was that the most important factor that affected educational attainment was social class, and then came ethnicity and gender. So if we speak about outschool factors in general, outschool factors are the factors that affect the attainment of the education attainment of people that are beyond the scope of the school, right? Amongst these outschool factors, we have social class, the very popular ones that we usually bring in under discussion. We have social class, we have gender, we have ethnicity, and we have intelligence. So what Stan found out was that the attainment gap associated with social class was twice as large as the biggest ethnic gap and 6 times as large as the gender gap. He also found that class, ethnicity, and gender were not sufficient to explain differences in education attainment. Now, what Strand is trying to explain over here is that the typical misconception that we carry, that it is just social class, ethnicity, and gender that end up affecting education attainment of pupils. According to Steve Stan, there were other factors too, other factors besides and beyond your social class, your ethnic origin, and your gender. And these were parental attitude. According to Strand, parental attitude, parental behavior play a very important role in terms of explaining differences in education attainment. Now, in a nutshell, what I'm trying to explain you is, according to Strand, it is not just your social class, ethnicity, or gender. There are other factors as well that we could use to explain differences in educational attainment. And amongst these factors, we would be discussing parental attitude and parental behavior over here. Now, because we're discussing all of this under the heading of cultural explanations, ask yourself a question. Would you agree if I say that South Asian parents such as Pakistanis, Indians, South Asian parents, they actually invest in the child's education. It's the attitude that they carry. People from Pakistan, I know of many middle class parents in Pakistan who claim that they've invested whatever they had in terms of their child's education. Now, it's the attitude that you're carrying, right? If being a parent, you think education is important, you'd invest more in it. And investment doesn't always have to do with money. It could be investment, it could be an emotional investment, it would be investment in terms of the efforts you put in terms of getting your child educated. It could be investment in terms of the environment that you're providing that the child from the very beginning, which makes the child feel like he or she has to attain, he or she has to study further. Now, other factors included parental attitude and behavior, which was significantly associated with attainment. Parents' expectations. You know what? Parents, like I said, like I mentioned, parental expectation or parental or emotional investment that parents make. Parental expectation, according to Strand, could play a very important role. According to Strand, parents' expectations that students would continue the education after age 16. Remember, in UK, your education is compulsory till you're 16. After 16, you have an option of not continuing with your education. But according to Strand, there are some ethnic minority parents who play a very important role in terms of making the kids realize, in terms of making the kids of making the key or in terms of keeping the kids under the impression that tomorrow when they have an option of discontinuing education, they still have to pursue education. They shouldn't be letting go of the educational journey. So parents expectations that students would continue the education after age 16 were particularly important, as were providing with a computer for the children and a private tutor. Now, these factors, according to Strand, they play a very important role. Different ethnic minorities or members of different ethnic origins carry a different attitude when it comes to the educational attainment of a pupil. Imagine for a bit, if a parent does not, you talk about your parents, right? Your parents, I'm sure they invest a lot of time, they invest a lot of I mean, there's a lot of emotional investment from their end too, along with the material support they provide you. So according to Strand, parents' expectations that students would continue the education after age 16 were particularly important, as were providing with a computer for the children and a private tutor. In general, ethnic minority parents were more likely than white British parents to have positive attitudes and behavior towards education. So, if members of if members of a particular ethnic origin, if it is a part of their culture, if they feel like educational success is important for their child, it's going to translate into the interaction that they have with their child. It's going to translate into the environment that they provide their child. And if, of course, if a child grows up in an environment where he or she is made to feel like, or where he or she is made to believe like education education plays a very important role, it's eventually going to reflect in the child's educational success. So in a nutshell, through the study that was conducted by Professor Steve Strand in 2015, which was a longitudinal study. According to Steve Strand, number one, social class, ethnicity, and gender. These factors are important. Among these, social class is the most important. But we shouldn't restrict ourselves to only these factors in terms of explaining educational success of a pupil. According to Strand, it is also the parental attitude and behavior. If parents expect the child to continue their education after 16, this would eventually result in the child putting in more efforts, which would eventually translate into educational success. So the first factor that we discussed over here was parental factor, or the first factor we discussed over here was parental factor playing its role. Number two, we'd speak about cultural capital. Now, as we speak about cultural capital, I'm sure you all remember us discussing Bourdieu over and over again. Pierre Bourdieu and his concept of cultural capital. What is cultural capital over here? Cultural capital, or in other words, the upper edge that individuals from a particular background hold, typically from the middle class background or the upper class background, the upper edge that they hold, which helps them with the educational success, the cultural capital, right? The word cultural capital. Your capital is your asset, your cultural capital, or aspects of your culture that are to be seen as an asset which eventually helps you with educational attainment. Now, Bourdieu's idea, Pierre Bourdieu, Bourdieu's idea of cultural capital may help to explain the educational attainment of some ethnic minority students. For instance, if we speak about children from the Chinese and the Indian heritage, right? Children from the Chinese and the Indian heritage, they typically constitute, or they typically make up the middle class, or they typically belong to the more affluent classes, or they usually come from a richer background. So see, if children from the Chinese and Indian origin, if they are rich, if they have the material resources, according to Bourdieu's theory, they would have their cultural capital too. And cultural capital, according to Bourdieu, again plays a very important role in terms of explaining differences in education attainment, where Bourdieu is a staunch supporter of the idea that your cultural capital helps you as a student to perform better, and your cultural capital helps you as a student to do well, and to do well in your examinations, and get educational success. So, according to Bourdieu, children from the Chinese and Indian origin, if they're doing well in education, we could use their cultural capital as the reason behind that. Now, see, it makes a lot of sense for us to believe that children from the Chinese and Indian heritage, they're performing well according to Bourdieu's theory, because, like I said, they are more affluent, because, like I said, they are richer than the rest. How do you think we could explain Pakistani and Bangladeshi children over here? Because you know what? Statistically, we do know that individuals from the Pakistani and Bangladeshi origin, they aren't that financially successful as compared to individuals from the uh, Chinese origin or from the Indian origin. Now, we are talking about four different ethnicities over here, right? The Chinese and the Indian, right? Chinese and Indian, I don't know if it's written over here. I'll just pick it up. So, individuals from the Chinese and the Indian origin, because they are from the middle class or the upper class, they would have more of cultural capital, right? On the other hand, if we speak about individuals from the Pakistani and the Bangladeshi origin, because they typically aren't doing as well as the other two ethnic origins that we discussed. Let's just say they're more from the working class. The question is, if these individuals have cultural capital, what explanation could be used? What explanation could be used for this? See, for Chinese and Indian, it makes a lot of sense. They're rich, and because they're rich, the kids would have more of cultural capital. What about these two, the Pakistani and the Bangladeshi origin kids? They're typically not doing that well. How is it that they have the cultural cap? They have cultural capital even when they do not belong to the social classes, according to Bourdieu, that usually have a higher cultural capital. Now, taking this ahead, I'll just read this out for you so that you understand it better. For example, people of Chinese and Indian heritage in Britain have the largest proportion of middle class members and the highest attainment. Their high attainment may result from having the largest amount of cultural capital. But what about people of the Pakistani and Bangladeshi heritage? Question mark, who are doing much better than the class position would suggest. Now, like I said, because they're not rich. If they're not rich, how is it that they're doing good? Right? And is it because of cultural capital? And if it is because of the cultural capital, where do they have this, where does this cultural capital come from when they're not rich? In view of the relatively high proportion of low income members, these groups should not, in theory at least, have the cultural capital to produce levels of attainment. Now, for this, Tariq Maudud came up with an explanation. It's an amazing explanation. According to Maudud in 2004, you know what? According to Maudud, even when individuals from the Pakistani and Bangladeshi origin, even when individuals from the Pakistani and Bangladeshi origin, they're not financially well off. They still have this cultural capital, probably because when they moved from the country of origin, or when they moved from Pakistan or Bangladesh, they they belonged to the affluent classes over there, right? Many people, as you all would be aware, I'm sure you would know someone or the other who has left Pakistan or Bangladesh today for a more, for a better future, right? If there are many people from who move from Pakistan and Bangladesh and move to UK for a better future for their kids, right? There are many parents that I personally know of who pretty much left everything that they had in the country of origin, and they just moved to the UK just so that their kids could have a better and a more secure future. Do you know what? According to Madhud's explanation, these parents, because they were doing pretty well in the country of origin, when they moved to the UK, initially, even when initially they could not do well financially. But guess what? This cultural capital that they or the kids have today, it comes from the country of origin. Back then, back when they were in the country of origin like Pakistan and Bangladesh, because they belonged to the affluent classes, because they were financially successful there, they had that cultural capital. Because they had that cultural capital, the kids have that cultural capital now too. So Tariq Maudud, and if anything, do you know what? No one can take away your cultural capital. If you had it, you had it. Even when you moved from your country of origin to a new country, let's just say UK, no one can take that cultural capital away from you. So according to, if we put Bourdieu's theory of cultural capital over here to use, it's probably because these parents, they were doing well in the country of origin. They had the cultural capital over there. When they moved to the UK, it's that cultural capital that is helping their students, helping their kids do better in education. So Tariq Maudud in 2004 argues that many members of minority ethnic groups may have more cultural capital than would be expected from their current class position. This may be because their jobs after migrating to the UK were lower in pay and prestige than the previous jobs. This might be due to the time taken to find suitable jobs after arrival in the UK, or to discrimination in the labor market. Consequently, according to Tariq Maudud again, a number of things may result due to this, right? So, as Maudud puts it, it's the reservoir of cultural capital that these parents they carrying from their previous jobs, right? From their country of origin. One factor. Number two, a powerful desire on the part of migrants to improve their own position and their children's prospects. That's one of the popular reasons many parents would give for them moving from countries like Pakistan or Bangladesh to the UK, right? Many parents say they're doing it for their kids, a powerful desire, right? To see their kids succeed. Number three, a high value placed on the education as means of doing this, right? Education by many South Asians is seen as a vehicle, as a tool that could be used to improve their social position, their social class, to be able to experience social mobility. Number four, this value being passed on to their children. Now, the value that parents give to education, South Asian parents, in this case, we're referring to the Pakistanis and Bangladesh, the value they give to education, this value transferred. Yeah, this value being transferred. This set of values being transferred to their kids, who today see education as being as education is playing an important role in terms of their educational success. So we have so far spoken about cultural factors. While discussing cultural factors, we spoke about Professor Steve Strand from the University of Oxford. Number two, we spoke about Tariq Maudud and the explanation Maudud provides for the cultural capital that individuals from the Pakistani and Bangladeshi origin carry. Number three, we'd discuss this study by Professor Tamina Bassett. And here it is. Professor Tamina Bassett, rather, I'd say, Professor Emeritus Tamina Bassett from the Staffordshire University. According to this study that was conducted by Bassett in the year 2013. Now, what is Bassett's study about? Bassett's study is about British Asians and educational capital. British Asians and educational capital. Now, when I talk about British Asians over here, I'm referring to students from the Indian and the Pakistani origin or heritage. Bassett in 2013 studied a group of 36 British Asian students from Indian and Pakistani heritage, Hindus, Sikhs, and Muslims. The age bracket they belonged to was 15 to 16 years, and their parents as well as their grandparents. So we're talking about the study that was conducted by Professor Temina Bassett in the year 2013. This study was conducted on British Asian students. There were 36 British Asian students that she conducted a research on. They were from the Pakistani and Indian background heritage, or Pakistan and India were the country of origin. They were Hindus, they were Sikhs, and they were Muslims. The study was conducted on these students, one, and their parents as well as grandparents. The grandparents were from the working class, and some parents were also from the working class, while others were middle class. The research was based on individual interviews and focus groups. So we're talking about qualitative data, rich qualitative data being collected over here that is supported by interpretivist, if you remember this from AS. Now, according to Bassett, moving on towards the findings of Bassett's research, according to Bassett, whatever the ethnicity, religion, age, or social class may be, remember the sample that she collected her data from, the grandparents were from the working class. In many cases, the parents were also from the working class. And in some cases, they were from the middle class too. So according to the study that was conducted by Bassett, whatever their ethnicity, their religion, their age, or their social class might be, it was strikingly clear that education was seen as capital that would transform the lives of the younger generation. Do you realize this is the role that your culture plays? We're talking about cultural aspiration over here. We're talking about the significance a particular culture or individuals from a particular culture give to educational success. Remember, while discussing Maudud, when I said Indians and Pakistanis or people from the South Asian region, they see education as a tool. They see education as a vehicle that could transform their lives. They see education as the tool that could help them attain success, that could help them experience upward social mobility, that could help them improve their social class position. So whatever the religion, age, social class, or ethnicity might be, it was strikingly clear, according to Bassett, that education was seen as a capital, as an asset that would transform the lives of younger generations. Parents and grandparents impressed on young people the importance of good education and how it would lead to a well-paid job and a high standard of living. Like I said, if your parents, it's a cultural value, it's your culture. Remember, all of this, my dear, is being discussed under cultural explanations, right? Cultural explanations. So it's a cultural uh, factor. It would be referred to as a cultural factor when your parents and your grandparents, they keep on emphasizing on how your educational success could actually lead to well-paid jobs, how your educational success could actually lead to a higher standard of living. So according to Bassett, migrants and their children always have aspirations of upward social mobility. Migrants and their children always have aspirations for upward social mobility. This is a key attribute of people who leave their country of origin in search of a better life. Remember, the same, this is pretty much in line with what Maudud's findings were like. According to Tariq Maudud, individuals from the individuals, many individuals from South Asian countries, they leave their country, they leave their probably stable jobs too, because they want a better and a secure future for their kids in more developed parts of the world like the UK. So this is a key attribute of people who leave their country of origin in search of a better life for themselves and their future generations. Students, both boys and girls, accepted the advice of their elders, as the following quotations indicate. Now, these are a couple of quotations that we're using from the study by from the study by Temina Bassett. Now, I think it's good that they're encouraging me, right? If a student feels like it is good that the parents and the grandparents are encouraging him or her, don't you think this cultural value will eventually translate into educational success? In many cases, it would. Number two, another quotation: my parents are always telling me education is good, right? A cultural aspiration again. Number three, my parents are working hard for us to do our best in the future and go to the university. So we just spoke about three different factors. We just spoke about three different theorists: Professor Steve Strand, one from the University of Cambridge, number two, Tariq Maudud, number three, Professor Temina Bassett, right? The topic that we discussed today, my dear, was cultural explanations, or using cultural explanations to understand differences in educational attainment based on ethnicity. Now, I hope this must have helped. I hope all of this helped. The next topic we'd do would be ethnicity, culture, and attainment. So we done discussing the role culture plays. Now we talk about different subcultures and the role these subcultures play in terms of explaining educational success or educational attainment. So yeah, this is pretty much it for the day. Take good care of yourselves. Stay happy, healthy, safe, and protected. Stay humble, spread positivity, spread smiles, and Allah Hafiz.